Hello Brindley Heath, it's Mrs Lesniewski here, and today I want to talk to you about disability as part of our series of assemblies on diversity. I know in recent weeks you've discussed a range of diverse spectrums such as ethnicity, gender, race and so on. And today I wanted to talk to you about disability and considering how people who have disabilities are actually in fact just differently abled. So the first thing that we need to understand really is what is meant by the term disabled or disability. And 11 years ago in 2010, the government updated the law regarding people who are considered to be disabled. So by law, you are considered to be disabled if you have a physical or mental impairment. That means something that stops your body or your mind from working adequately to have a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. This doesn't mean that these people can't join in normal daily activities, but it might mean that things have to be changed or adapted to meet those needs. So I wanted to think about examples of disabilities that we're aware of. If we look along the top row, you can see there's a lady there who has a guide dog and a stick. She is blind. She's visually impaired. She uses her dog to help her to see. Then next to her is a little girl in a wheelchair. She's unable to walk. She still is able to get around through the use of that wheelchair. It's an adaptation that's been made to her life in order to help her to access things. Next to that little girl is another little girl who actually, if you look very carefully, has got a range of prosthetic legs. She's actually wearing a running blade. So her adaptations that have been made for her to access things are that she's got these prosthetic limbs. Finally, on the top row, there's a picture of Ellie Simmons, a Paralympic swimmer who's won various medals at the Paralympics. She actually suffers from a condition called dwarfism, which means that she doesn't grow to a normal full adult height, and her legs and arms are slightly shorter than would be typical. But it hasn't stopped her from achieving some amazing things. On the bottom row, there's a lady at the bottom who has a condition called Down syndrome, and that's a genetic condition that can affect a number of things such as mobility, communication and understanding. And I love her smile. She just looks like the happiest person in the world. In the centre of the bottom row, there's a little boy who has cerebral palsy. And this is a spectrum condition too. It can affect people differently. But in this instance, we can see that it's affected this young man's mobility and his ability to walk. And finally, on that bottom row, we have a little lad who has quite a severe form of epilepsy. That's affected, again, his communication skills and also his ability to get around. What I love about all of these pictures are the smiling faces and the fact that these guys are doing ordinary things. Actually, we've got people going for a walk. It looks like the young lad in the wheelchair is playing some form of wheelchair football. We've got people swimming, running, accessing life, and they're all beaming. Because just because you've got a disability doesn't mean that you would enjoy life or be able to participate in things in a massively different way to that of able-bodied people. So there are difficulties that people with disabilities may face, and I want you to quickly talk to your partner about some of the things that might be different or indeed more difficult for some of the people that you saw on the last slide. Once you're done, teacher can share these with the class, so pause the video now. Okay, so I'm going to ask your teachers to refer to the video clip that was sent along with a link to this assembly. This is Alexandra's story. Alexandra is a young lady who has Down syndrome and is a triplet, one of three siblings. While you're watching the video, I want you to think about what Alexandra enjoys doing. What makes her just like you guys? Are the things that she enjoys the same, or are they different to that of her sisters? And are there any things that she finds hard, and how does she get help with these? How are things adapted to meet the things that she needs? Enjoy the video, and your teachers will discuss with you at the end. Okay, so we've looked at Alexandra's story. And now we're going to look at, same but different, we're going to look at Sebi's story. Sebi is a gorgeous young man. He's actually my friend's son. And he was born with a physical disability called global spasticity. And this means that all of his muscles are too tight. Basically, this has stopped him when he was growing from sitting unaided, standing, crawling, or even walking. He's had to go through some extremely tough things to enable him to get there. In his lifetime, and he's only 8, he's had over 30 operations, including operations to lengthen his hamstrings and calves, where they had to slice into the muscles and inject various chemicals. Similarly, he's had to have some spine lengthening operations, which was very risky, could have resulted in things getting worse. He's had his hips shaved and reset. His femurs, that's a long bone in your leg, were cut and re-angled. And the bones in his feet were fused together, that means joined together, because he needed to be able to balance more effectively. He has to have regular intensive physiotherapy daily, and he lives a life which actually, unfortunately for Seb, is dominated by pain. He's had to grow up really quickly, as has his younger sister, and he's had to learn to understand and accept the ways in which his disability prevents him sometimes from joining in some of the things that his friends take for granted. However, he still has lots of fun and has a go at a really, really wide range of activities, so he enjoys things loads. Because his parents knew how difficult it was for Seb, and he'd had a load of really tough operations that took time to heal from, about 18 months ago they decided to treat him and his sister to a day out at a really well-known theme park. They booked this well in advance, knowing that actually access can be very difficult for people in wheelchairs like Seb, and they detailed all of his disability. They detailed all the things he finds difficult and the things that he might find it tricky to do. They were assured that this wouldn't be a problem. Upon arrival, they were given a disabled pass and told how to navigate the park. So immediately they decided to go to the ride that Sebi desperately wanted to try out. He was obsessed with. Unfortunately though, they were met by rude stares from the staff as soon as they noticed Seb in his wheelchair. His father, and not Seb, was told that for safety reasons Seb would have to climb 3 steps, with support of an adult if needs be, to prove that he could evacuate from the ride in an emergency. Somehow, through sheer grit and determination, Seb managed this. He was exhausted and he was in pain, but still the staff weren't satisfied. Very publicly in front of all of the queue, Sebi's father, again, not Seb, was told that he'd need to climb the steps again to make sure. Sebi still hadn't been acknowledged by a member of staff at this point. He was humiliated, embarrassed and upset, and all of his excitement about the day quickly went away, vanished. People in the queue even started grumbling about the length of the queue and the wait, and the staff were still debating Seb's physical ability to climb the steps and access the ride, really publicly and in a very inconsiderate and unkind manner. After being held up for 45 minutes, a very embarrassed and sad young man got to go on his ride. But the events of the day had actually ruined it for him. As soon as he got off, he requested to go home. I want you to think about whether you think Seb was treated fairly, and is it ever fair to treat people that way due to a disability, and what perhaps could have been done differently. It's time for your teachers to pause and you can have a discussion. Okay, same but different. This is Macy's story. We saw Macy on one of the slides earlier. Macy is a little girl that goes to the same school as my eldest daughter, and she was born with an incomplete ankle joint. So the decision was taken at the age of 2 to amputate beneath the knee so that she could walk. This would obviously be with the aid of a prosthetic limb. You can see there in the photograph all of the different prosthetic feet and lower legs that Macy has had since the age of 2. These need to be changed on roughly an 18-monthly basis because obviously Macy's still growing. One thing that Macy found was that she couldn't do ordinary things like riding a bike. She couldn't join in PE lessons and run in the same way that her friends can. So Macy's determination and that of her parents meant that she wrote to everybody possible. She contacted everyone she could think of. And actually, our wonderful NHS agreed to make her one of the first children in the UK with a prosthetic blade. You might see these if you've ever watched the Paralympics or any other sports of that nature where people have potentially got amputations. Actually, this is really uncommon for children to have. Now again, this piece of kit for Macy has been life-changing. It means she can join in PE lessons, it means she can run around the field at lunchtimes. But for Macy, she's turned this determination and this fighting spirit into something different. About 2 years ago, Macy and part of a charity that deal with children who've had amputations and their rehabilitation decided that they would climb and then abseil down the Millennium Dome building in London. It's enormous. It's no mean feat, and I'm certain that I couldn't do it myself as an adult. But despite her disability, and despite some of the challenges that might pose, Macy did it. She raised thousands of pounds with children who'd also got amputations for charity, which was just incredible. So what I want you now to think about is actually, what's your opinion about Macy's attitude to overcoming obstacles? And how has a disability actually helped her to overcome these? Okay, so we've heard Alexandra's story, we've heard Sebi's story, we've heard Macy's story, all of whom have got very different disabilities, very different things that they find easy and find hard. What I want you to do now is to talk to your partner and see if you can devise a list of suggestions for how we can treat people who are disabled. This will just be a quick list and we'll gather our ideas together at the end. Your teachers can pause the slide now. Okay, so I went through various research opportunities and looked at the internet, and I looked at a lot of suggestions from people with disabilities themselves. And this was kind of a rough list of some of the things that they suggested for how they wanted to be treated. So first of all, one of the big suggestions was to treat people with disabilities as equals. They also suggested that they wanted to be treated with kindness and respect. Another suggestion was always ask before you help somebody. Sometimes people actually would rather have a go themselves first. And of course, don't stare or point. It would be rude anyway, wouldn't it? Don't point out obvious differences. And another thing that was suggested was to never demonstrate pity. It can be really demoralising. Instead, be kind, be tolerant, be welcoming. And I think importantly, people with disabilities want you to emphasise the person that they are and not the disability that they have. It certainly doesn't define them. And last but definitely not least, remember that not all disabilities are the same. People with disabilities have a wide variety of skills and personalities, and actually we want to get to know that person, don't we? And not the limitations or things that they find difficult. So, I want you to think about what you've learned today. What are the things that really made you think? And what are the things that you might do differently or think about a little bit more as a result of this assembly? I hope you found today really informative. Thank you for listening, Brindley Heath.